friends, welcome to Cashing In on Content Marketing. I'm Amanda Milligan, the marketing director at Fractal, and every week on the show I interview marketing experts about ways to know the value of your work and get buy-in for your strategies. This week we are exploring the concept of vulnerability. This is something I could talk about for hours in regard to our personal lives and mental health, but today we're going to approach it from a marketing perspective with our guest, SEO strategist Tamara Sykes. Welcome to the show, Tamara.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about vulnerability because this is a good topic.
Yeah, I've been excited in some recent episodes. We've been talking about some kind of like more nebulous concepts, like empathy was one of the other ones we had, but they're so integral to marketing when you really think about it and can apply to so many different aspects. And vulnerability, I feel like, has been more, I hate to say it this way, but like trending in terms of just life and mental health. But I do think it's so important for brands as well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So just to, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like we have to thank Brene Brown for that one.
Yes. Love me some Brene Brown.
Same. So yeah, she's really helped bring it to the forefront, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. So to kick things off, I kind of wanted to just ask you, what do you think it means to be vulnerable from a marketing perspective?
Ooh, okay, so it's a fun one. I like to say vulnerability equals being real. It's like the short version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And marketing, of course, that's very like high level and not super specific. So I would say think about it as storytelling, conversation, and being confident in what you're saying to your like audience, your clients. That's really in a nutshell. Like I know we're going to get into more specifics, but if we're talking about like just really short understanding of it, like be real, be confident, be trustworthy, just be honest.
I think it ties in a lot to, and this is a word I've thrown around more than vulnerability with marketing, but authenticity.
Yes.
I think that's the more common thing that's talked about.
Yeah.
But there's different levels of it, I think.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Vulnerability taps into like some of the deeper things or the harder things to talk about, maybe.
Exactly. It's like, because we talk about Brene Brown, like how she talks about vulnerability. I mean, generally speaking, even in a business sense, like vulnerability is a very, like, let's not go there kind of topic. So in marketing, especially when marketing seems to be more focused on how do we get that person to buy and to connect and all of those things, it has to be talked about, because if not, you're really just going to be selling at a person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not the most fun topic for everyone, but we have to deal with it. And authenticity is more the buzzword, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think authenticity is broader. It's basically just being true to like your brand, where this is like, not only are you going to be true about your brand, but we're going to like dig into some stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna get all down in there, uncomfortable parts, and we're really gonna start getting to some things that maybe you want to keep behind closed doors, probably.
Yeah.
But if you share it, you're gonna connect better with people. I think it's more like getting into the struggles and not always talking about my major wins, but getting into the struggles of like what you're doing.
I love that you mentioned that, because I see that on Twitter a lot. Like people are saying Twitter's like 90% people's wins all the time. Like that's not, I think literally somebody I followed maybe just tweeted about that like seconds before we, and that's why it's like really top of mind. So if they did, I'll include that in the show notes. So that's really top of mind. But like even my colleagues sometimes will be like, especially during COVID, I think it was rough for people to see like only wins. Like you couldn't always connect with that.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is mostly known for this.
Yeah.
Instagram always gets the blame for this. On Twitter, it's definitely been a thing more so during COVID. I probably because that saying like everyone has the same 24 hours. I think it's because of that. I think it's because everyone still subscribes to that mindset, and it's really like, yes, everyone from a metric standpoint has the same 24 hours. But if like the pandemic has shown us anything, it's like everyone has different things they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So on Twitter, what I definitely think happens is like you see someone winning and or talking about how they got their win, and you just assume that, oh my gosh, I'm not doing it the right way. I'm not taking all these steps to like market my business or promote myself in this way. And so I'm failing, but you honestly don't have the same life context, like
Yeah.
at all. And so it does, yeah, Twitter definitely had that happen, I feel like this year. And I will say it's important as a marketer to know what is going to trigger you and make you feel like you're not worthy or you're not doing enough. And maybe it's honestly looking at it and saying like, I need to like mute this person or this account or these types of phrases in my feed so that I can actually be productive and keep doing what I am great at, even if it's going to take me longer than everybody else. Like that's actually part of being a better marketer and being vulnerable, is just saying like, you know what, I personally can't see this every day. Like I'm happy for them. I'm not, like dogging them in any way, but I need to take a step back and, follow people and follow other brands and, everything that is actually going to like replenish what I'm doing and make me feel like I am doing great versus like the flip side. So you have to make that choice. And that's a hard thing for people to do because they feel like they have to follow certain brands and certain people to show that they're on the radar. You don't.
This topic it's so fascinating to me because it applies so much to personal as well
Yeah.
as marketing, and I think that anyone listening will see the applications of both.
Yeah.
From the next question I want to get into are like some examples of how you can show vulnerability, and I'm thinking about you mentioned that it got worse during COVID.
Yeah.
And it was hard, I market Fractal, right? And people would say,
Right.
how are you doing? Right when COVID happened, I'm like, how are things going, And it was hard to be like, oh, some of our clients paused. I understand why. They literally were panicked, And it was to be in that mindset of like, you don't have to be everything's fantastic, we're killing it as always. Like,
right. Be
that's
honest.
everyone's like, yeah, you have this instinct to do that, but that doesn't make anything better. It makes everyone else feel worse. It's not being authentic to the situation. So what are some examples in your eyes of ways to tap, especially not with COVID, in any other time?
Any other time, yeah.
What are some examples of utilizing that vulnerability in content?
I would definitely say, so I like to look at, there's two particular examples that I have that I love personally. So I would say in a B2B sense, there's a coach called Mariah Cause, and she actually, she is not always on social media, which is, I think, from a marketing perspective, everyone's like, I have to be on social media to like be marketing. And it's just like, pause, do what you can. And that was a thing even in the pandemic, but it should have been considered before and should be something you consider, in the future. But something that she did in an email is that she was definitely, marketing her service, which is for like freelancers, coaches, that kind of thing. But she mentioned the reason why she even invented this program was because she herself had been experiencing mental health issues. And that, I remember like reading the email on my phone and like stopping in my tracks because I was on this email list for a while. I had an idea of who she was and like what she did and like great. But when she said that, it like connected with me immediately in this particular time, because for me personally, being a mom during the pandemic had its own things, but I was actually also going through this phase of like, I cannot keep up with the Joneses of what everyone is doing in business. Like I can't do it. Like I cannot do this. And I felt personally like, oh, like I'm failing at this. And when I saw that, and then I like looked back at what she'd done and like how she presents herself online, I was like, oh my gosh, like she's being so raw right now. And it wasn't like she was revealing her private life per se, but she was just honest and vulnerable that she deals with it. And so she set up her business in a way to allow her to like invest in herself. I was like, I can do this. I don't have to be doing every single thing everyone else is doing. So that's definitely an example that I personally love. And another one I love is Aerie.
Love that
Which,
brand.
yeah, right, right. I feel like, so I'm an immigrant, and when I first moved to the US, like, having the jacket and everything was like the thing to have as far as like, being in school. And honestly, I feel like got lost in the shuffle there for a little bit, when it came to fashion brands. And then they really started to hone in, which is why we both love them now, is that they really started to hone in on real life. Like they got real people to, not just, influencers, but real people to represent their brand. They stopped using like the Photoshop and stuff in their marketing. They were like, let's show real people. I started to see more of like different life stages, I felt like. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes brands focus in on one specific life stage, but they started showing people of different ages, different contexts, different lifestyles. And I was like, oh, I can connect with this brand now. Because before it was just, everyone in school is wearing it, so I need to wear it too. I'm part of the cool crowd. But now I'm just like, oh, I really love this brand. I probably haven't really shopped there as often, but I still connect with them. And it's because they decided to show a different aspect of fashion that, yes, a lot of brands have stopped photoshopping and all that stuff and it's become a trend, but like it just seems so authentic from Aerie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just feels like, okay, they really mean this. And those are like two great examples of, you know what, like now I feel connected to them and they're always going to come up in my mind when I want to buy something or want to look for who's an expert in something. Like I'm always going to think of a personal brand and an actual like fashion brand, like a corporate brand.
I love those examples. I think that the Aerie one speaks to something marketers will often do is just try to do what their competitors are doing, but better. And that can certainly work. But this is an example of how you deviate from the norm
Mm-hmm.
and have your brand stand for something a little different, and how much that will stand out if it's authentic to your brand values, right? Because you're saying like that wasn't being met, and now you identify them
Yeah,
as being that brand, your go-to brand, because they're representing a wider group of people.
exactly. Exactly. And it doesn't feel forced. I think that's another thing. Is like when you're talking about vulnerability, a lot of people try to force it. And that's where you have to take a step back and say, like, wait a second, like, is this really true to who we are as a brand, who we want to be? Or are we just forcing it? Because I don't think people realize, especially, I mean, this happens on the brand side, especially when you force something, it comes across.
Yeah.
Like you're not fooling anyone. It's the forced aspect of it. Just be who you are. And that is actually part of vulnerability, is being okay with that and walking in your truth as a brand.
Let me ask you something based on that. Do you ever have conversations with clients? I can imagine marketers being like, I don't know what our values as a company are. Like, I know what's on our website or something, but I don't know like what that core is. Have you ever had those types of conversations?
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation. Because so it's ironic. So a lot of people will within companies, of course, everyone goes through this like, these are my values and these are great, and like they like put them on LinkedIn and put them on the website, and like it's great. And I think they do that more for from an HR perspective. But what works from an HR perspective doesn't necessarily work for your audience that you want to like work with you, buy from you, like that. It's not the same type of thing. Um, and so what people have to face, like leadership, team members, what you have to face is this actually who we are? Not necessarily who we aspire to be, but is this actually who we are? And that question is a tough one for people to actually respond to, because sometimes who you are is not the prettiest picture. And it's almost like telling the person you have to face who you are in the mirror. For a lot of brands, that's actually that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
You want to be seen as the expert, but before you get seen as the expert, you need to be honest about who you are. Like what are your values? What are your non-negotiables? Besides talking about a specific topic, like who are you? Like, are you comfortable with that? Like outside of like rip everything away, like are you comfortable with that? And so that's definitely something that when you have that conversation,
Yeah.
it gets really interesting, really quick, really quick.
Yeah. I you can see so much of the trends and like how we personally feel going toward brands because it must be so difficult. People are kind of programmed to, like we mentioned before, not admit. That's what it feels like. It feels like admitting
Yeah.
a failure or something where you're imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, you end up. One of my questions was like, what are the benefits of showing vulnerability? I feel like you've mentioned several, and I think that one of them was what you had said about like that connection that can be
Yeah.
built.
You build a connection. Like, even if someone, like, a person you'd want to buy what you're offering is not ready to buy in that very moment, a connection is long term. Okay. Like, for me, I have not necessarily bought from Aerie in a very long time, but I still visit their Instagram. I still like love to see their ads. Let's say I know someone who might like that's their style. Like, I'll mention them, or I'll be like, hey, look at this person. Like, it just, even when they work with influencers, it's just, I'm more receptive to it overall. And you never know, maybe my daughter will like Aerie, and I'll be like, yeah, I'm cool with that. Just,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very sustainable way of marketing, um because it's so organic and it's true. Like, it's not forced, it's not put on. So it's definitely something that I feel like it's a huge benefit, but you have to be willing to go there. That's the thing. You have to be willing to go there. And if it's your brand, if you're the CEO or the executives that are in charge of it, like, you have to answer that question for your team. If you're within a company, like whether it's internal at, an agency, or you are the marketing person somewhere else, you have to be the leader and bring that up. And then it's a matter of like, how do I get them all on board for this? And that's another tough one, because you're in control of course, presenting the idea of being vulnerable in the marketing, but you're not necessarily in control of the final decision. And in that case, bringing up examples is probably going to be your best bet. You know,
Yeah.
that will help.
Do you have any? I think Aerie's a great example of that. Do you
Mhm.
know? Are there any others off the top of your head? And if not, you can send them to me later, and I can put them in the show notes. I hate putting people on the spot. Like, yes, tell
Yeah.
me, list me 10 brands.
And brands.
Yeah. Anybody else that comes to mind who's like really killing it at being vulnerable?
So they're technically competitors, but like, when I'm watching TV with my family at night, one of the two brands, Verbo and Airbnb. Verbo, in very early on in the pandemic, like with their marketing, I mean, they weren't really talking about themselves per se, but they were really hitting on that, aspect that we all are in, or well, yeah, we're still in it, basically,
Yeah.
of needing to change the scenery, right? That's just a simple thought, simple problem, simple thing we're all collectively facing, of like, we just need to change the scenery. And in their ads, like their TV ads specifically, they really took that one issue that we're all facing, that we all can connect with, and use that as the storyline for all of their TV ads. Which, going up against a competitor like Airbnb, is brilliant, because we all knew Airbnb. No one knew who Verbo was. Like, I didn't know, at least. They were,
Yeah.
behind, but they really showed, like, doing work and that idea of remote work, but they showed it in a way that was like happy, and then tied it to a different problem than just being like, I know you guys are all, over like working from home. Like, it was just, I know a lot of people connected with that simply because it was just a different perspective on a problem we were all facing together. And even though they're obviously selling, travel, they didn't just get stuck in, we are selling travel and here's why you should, and like 10 reasons. It was just like, here's a collective problem we're all facing. We understand, we feel that too. And here's just a story of how you can still do what you need to do and be just in a different space.
You're bringing up a really important point where it's not just your own vulnerability as a brand, but the vulnerability of your audience.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's two sides to that, right?
Yeah, there definitely are two sides to it. It's just like, being vulnerable overall in marketing is not about you. It starts with you doing some soul searching as a brand, as a person, but you need to tap into where your audience is at as well. Like, what problems are they facing? What things are, like, I like to always ask this, like, what things are keeping them up at night? Because it's probably not the question that you want to answer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily what you want to talk about, but like, there might be something deeper. And when you talk about that, then they're more like receptive to what you have to say about other things. And that's, that's when the floodgates open and you can now talk about what you offer, but you have to go a little bit deeper and say like, okay, what's really bothering them right now? Because it may not be what solution or offer you have. It just mean it's not. Yeah. And that's in COVID, post-COVID, pre-COVID. It's just like people are like very multifaceted. They have a lot of things going on in their life. And so when you can speak to different things, I know Fractal calls it like the tangential approach. Make sure I say that correctly. It's definitely that's also an idea of vulnerability, is like, don't focus so much on what's on brand for you. Just go beyond that and get into what your audience really needs and need someone to solve for them, or just encourage them or make them laugh. Like, go there. That's where you need to go. Yeah.
Absolutely. So whether somebody is trying to do this internally or they're trying to learn about their audiences, what do you think, you can get to the point where you're thinking, okay, I want to tap into this vulnerability. But where do I start? Like, what kind of questions do you think are useful to ask? So if someone's going to sit there and say, I'm going to do this brand soul searching.
Yeah.
What are those prompts to get them to arrive where it's going to be a productive insight?
Okay. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of my PR background here because I do this. I would say you always start with knowing your audience, but go beyond the brand personas. I know that's everyone's kind of like, can we stop talking about that? But go beyond that because they have a place. The best way of saying it is get into their psychographics, get into like, where do they live, but like, what are the problems that occur where they live? What things do they talk about? Sometimes what they talk about in that specific like area or location is not necessary for everybody else. Like, you're not talking to everybody, but when you start getting deep, start asking questions like that, as far as your audience is concerned, it really helps. Then when it comes to you, like doing the brand soul searching, like for the brand as an entity, the question is, what kind of lifestyle, like, what are we actually about? What kind of lifestyle do we truly have? Like, who are we? You have to approach the brand, like, we talk about the audience, brand persona, and like customer avatar and all that fun stuff. You like take the brand, and if you have to describe the brand as a person, like who is that person? And go through the same psychographic like exercise, basically, like, who are they? What do they care about? What are they willing to stand for? I mean, we know, especially, now being a little bit further into COVID, that people connect with brands that take stances on things, right? So if you think of like Ben and Jerry's is a big one that happened with social justice. Their approach to social justice worked the most because you could tell that they did a lot more soul searching before they just started throwing things on social media. Like, a lot of brands, I think, rushed to it, and it felt like Ben and Jerry's was like prepared to answer it well, and to like clearly define why. And they got a lot less negative reactions from people because it just felt, again, back to organic. Like, it felt real, it felt vulnerable.
Yeah, they weren't just trying to sell ice cream with it.
Right. I mean, down to the graphics of how they explain things. I was just like, what? Like, this is great. So, when you understand who the brand is as a person, like, take the brand back to like a personal level. When you understand that, you are in it, like, you have built the foundation to react or be proactive in situations. Another thing I like to say is, I forgot where I put this down. Oh, set boundaries. This is actually from Brene Brown too. It's on a personal level, but you do want to set boundaries as a brand. Usually, like, there's media policies and all this stuff, but you definitely want to understand, like, okay, if I was a person, I would have like, this is my private life and this is personal, but I'm willing to share it, right? As a brand, what were those lines for you? Because from a brand perspective, even when you're within an agency or with like just within a marketing team, you can't be the only person that ascribes to this, like I guess code of conduct per se. Everyone needs to be on the same page. If someone's the face of the company, or like everyone needs to be on the same page as to this is what we are willing to share. This is what is considered private, like almost like, you're not going to like blast, something that happens in like an argument internally online kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, sure, that's a struggle, but like, that's not something you need to be sharing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you need to have that conversation too, because I know Brene says this all the time. If you are vulnerable, but you don't have any boundaries, you're just oversharing. And that's where you don't want to go. It's just oversharing to the point that everyone's just like, oh, this feels like a sob story. Like, you know what I mean? And that does take some trial and error, but like, it's a good thing to know going into it.
I love that. I love that you brought that up. I also love the advice of using that same psychographic analysis that you do on your audience personas on yourself. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say that. Like, hey, apply that to your own brand while you're at it. Oh,
yes, I will.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Like that's great advice to give. I've never heard that. Yeah. So what advice would you give to somebody listening who's like, I'm ready, I want to have this conversation, but I'm in a pretty conservative company. Mm-hmm. So a lot of, especially bigger companies, Fortune 500s, they have a lot of hierarchy and it's a bureaucracy, and it's really difficult to kind of like chisel at. We're not just going to talk about like our very core branding.
Yeah.
I know that can't change overnight. I know that you can't sit there and like give a moving speech and change everyone, like 500 people's minds, but what do you have advice on how they can start making tiny steps in that direction?
I love tiny steps. I feel like my dad said like 1% a day is still progress. So I'm going to go with that one. I would say almost approach it like your relationship, like building a relationship with someone or like dating. If you meet someone, you don't just dive into the deep stuff. You don't be like, we are horrible at this and don't go at it that way. It will not work because that feels more like you're attacking something. But if you're seeing the brand as a person and you're seeing in a bigger like corporation, and you're seeing, the best way to say it is like how they all perceive the brand, going to them and saying like, hey, like just small changes. Hey, I had this idea that would really help connect us with our audience and help improve maybe sales or email signups, or tying it to something tangible that they can understand. Because again, as marketers, we understand all of the, the whole picture, right? Like if I'm connected here, it'll lead here and it'll do this and like, become a great domino effect. But when someone isn't necessarily in your role, they do not see it that way. So you have to put some effort towards starting to speak their language and presenting your idea in that lingo, basically. So it might mean like in sales, like for example, sales and marketing usually are really close together, but sometimes we're not on the same page. So explaining and saying like one of my favorite things to say is like, here's how we could sell like social media packages and connect it back to SEO, which is in my day job, I do SEO. And so you're just like, I mean, I do PR, I'm so sorry, but I work with the SEO team, but sometimes that doesn't connect because social media seems like I'm going to put myself out there. People are going to come for me, especially in the age today. Like, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to stay over here in website SEO land. And it's just like, hey, like, if you can show the connection of how those two work together and speak that person's language and say, you know what, you want people to connect with you and visit your website. And this is another way of connecting with them and meeting them where they're at. They're not going to just always they're going to find you on search, but there's other things that you can do on Twitter, as an example, that you cannot do in your website. Like if you're just making your website all about you, it's not really going to go well. But if you do it on Twitter and you show like how you overcame a struggle, or you learn something about starting a business, or like I've done this where I said like, I love SEO and PR, but I do not like cooking for over 30 minutes.
I definitely retweeted that.
like, it's a simple statement, but like, I didn't realize so many people were like, yeah, like I saw you retweet it. I was like, oh my gosh, so many people like understand me. Oh my gosh, we're all in this together. And it just like domino effect. I got followers out of it. I got people that like someone actually signed up for an offer that I have like on teaching SEO. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I did not see that coming. But even me, like, again, love vulnerability, but that's just a good example of like, if you can show, like, speak people's language and then take those examples and like, just again, talk about it internally. 1% a day is still progress. Just keep bringing it up.
Absolutely. I think that, like, even just mentioning that tweet,
yeah.
I don't know, is this your experience where sometimes it's easier to get buy-in for something if you have like the specific example? Like, I want to mention this tiny thing about us, just say yes or no, rather than saying like, what do you want to talk about? Like, how about this?
Yeah. If you have a very specific example, especially if you like kind of create a template for it, then you get buy-in a lot faster than if you just like, so I want to be vulnerable, but like, how can like you just come like that doesn't it because you're making the other person feel like it's more work. Like anytime you make someone feel like they have more homework to do, it does not ever lead to a really great result. Yeah. There are times when you don't have a choice. Like you need someone's like, you know, insight and their words to actually use. But like if you come with an example as small as that, then they're like, oh, because again, it's that separation of this is personal about the brand, but it's not our private institutional like resources or conversations or meetings, like, but it's still something we could talk about.
Yeah.
So it's just, if you come with an example, a template, an idea, 3 ideas, it will go over a lot better.
Yeah. And do, like you mentioned earlier in the interview, that you maybe pair that with examples of other brands doing something similar and succeeding.
Yes, if you can, especially if you can find them within your industry, and that's where you use that competitor analysis to your advantage. If you're like, hey, so they're like doing this and it's doing really well. Like, how can we, I always say, not copy, but adapt. It's like, we have to stress, do not copy, but adapt it to our, you know, to our own strategy. Then it's just like you have an example, you have something that you can be like, oh, I can reference this. Do you know what I mean? So I can make it more of our own, and then it still remains authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're just basically getting buy-in for the strategy, not the content itself.
Exactly. Don't copy and paste. Do not.
Right. So authentic. I just stole someone else's.
Yeah. No, the worst. That's like that's like a whole different, like, yeah. Like a whole different thing. Oh my goodness. No, don't copy, adapt. Put that everywhere. Just no copying, adapt.
I love it. So we've already reached the end of the episode, but there's something that I ask everybody in 2021 that's not completely tied to their topic, which is, cool. How are you able to stay creative?
Ooh, oh my goodness.
I need to do like a supercut of people's reactions to that
question. Oh my goodness. Yeah, like you really do. How do I say creative? Oh my goodness. The topic of that's the question of the century.
Which some people's answers are that they don't. And that's talk about being vulnerable and authentic, which is just like, listen, I'm not. Like, I'm kind of in that mode where I've struggled with it a lot. And that's why I ask.
It's a great question. I've been honest the whole time. I don't know why I keep saying to be honest.
To be honest, this one time.
Yeah, like, I need to really remove that from my vocabulary when it comes to being honest the whole time. I have... It's a roller coaster. I have days that I do very well at creating space so I can be creative or like, you know, strengthen that skill. And I have days that's not. I don't want to be in creative land. I just want to be in like organization, do nothing land.
Yeah.
And honestly, what I've learned is that I need to give myself the freedom to have on and off days when it comes to creativity, because that actually is what helps it.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people, I'm an achiever. So I'm always like trying to achieve something every single day. And that actually hurts my creativity. So I've learned that lesson. That's what I could say for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. A recent episode we got into, I think it's similar to what you're saying, where you get into like a flow and you just like, don't shame yourself if your current flow is just, I'm just doing just typing, like, easy tasks, because I just cannot handle
I can't.
critical thinking or writing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's been pretty much what's worked for me too. I'm like, today I am not writing an article because my brain cannot do it. I'm going to maybe book some guests for the show or do something else.
Something
like,
simpler. Just because if you're doing the hard stuff all the time, it's almost like you burn out like so much faster. So it's, that's been the thing. It's like some days I am going to binge TV and I'm going to be cool. Like, I'm just be cool. That just took me a while to get there.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot of productivity shaming going on in society and Twitter.
Yeah. That's probably a better analysis of what's happening on Twitter right now.
Just productivity shaming.
Yeah, like, you need to be doing this and this and this, and it's like, no, you just need to sit down and watch Masked Singer and call it a day. You'll be fine. Ice cream. I don't know. Whatever.
Ice cream is 100% my jam. I eat ice cream. I've been trying not to eat it every single day. That's where I'm at. Like, should I skip today?
Yeah, but that's what I've been doing is allow, like, I did tweet this myself because I needed it myself, was I said, like, you don't have to earn your rest. And that's been how, that's what I've been doing. That's the truth.
Love that.
Yeah.
So, Tamara, knowing the objective of the show is to help content people understand the value of it and get buy-in, who would you recommend to be guests on future episodes?
Ooh. Oh boy, this is a hard one. And
if you can't think of any immediately, we can just chat offline and you can send
us I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel like the example I use, like Mariah Cause, she's a really, like, and she does, like I said, she targets more business owners basically, but that's B2B. She would be a really good person because she, like I said, she uses it in at least her email marketing for sure. And when she is on social media, she's very vulnerable, but she's not exact. She's doing that, like, this is personal, but not private. She's really good at that. That would be a good one. And then obviously if you can get anyone from Vrbo or Airbnb, I didn't really dive into the Airbnb example, but their recent ads have been very much like very storytelling, and you don't even know it's the brand till the end when they put the logo in. But anyone from there would also be great because they're both doing it with their ads, or have at least done it. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights. It has honestly been a lot of fun.
It has been fun. I love this. I'm just excited to be on here. Thank you so much for asking me. And yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm glad. I had a great time, and I think it's a really important conversation. If you've listened to this and want even more tips, sign up for our podcast newsletter by going to the podcast page on the Fractal website. And if you've learned anything from this show, we'd love it if you'd subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review. Finally, if you have feedback, suggestions, ideas, thoughts on whether I should dye my hair blue or purple next, or anything you'd like to share with me, shoot me an email at amanda@frac.tl. I think Tamara has thoughts on that. I'm a shameless extrovert who would love to hear from you. Thank you to Sean Kelly for podcast music and editing, and to Joao Pereira for logo design. And thank you, dear listener. We hope you'll join us next time.